Okay, first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next would be the seating of alternates. Let's see. Ryan Emmerich is not on, and Dick Hill will join us. Let's see. Bob Laban is not here, but Bill Tolley is. So Bill, until Dick or both Dick and Brian join us, you will be a seated alternate.
Fine.
Okay, we're going to do public comments. The public comments were noticed in the call for the meeting and on the website to be sent in by email. We have received 9 comments. All of them, except maybe 1 or 2, should be read within our 2 minutes. So I will now read the public comments. These are not for discussion. Oh, wow. Ray, you're going to show them for us.
Yes, Sean, we're going to put them up on the board.
Well, that's even better. Number 1 from Blair McLaughlin, 630 North Main Street, I guess, Southbury. This is not time to buy a pool or tennis place, and I think everyone in Southbury a vote. There is other ways to look at things. Number 2, please. Number 2, Blake Deming, 253 Valley Stream Lane. Hello, Southbury and Region 15 are known for their excellent schools. This is part of the reason our taxes are so high. Lowering the school budget will affect our children's education directly. This is a terrible idea, and it would make me think twice about raising my kids in this town. Please rethink the budget. Our kids' education depends on it. Thank you. Number 3, please. From Ann Armino, 73 Pepper Hill Road in Southbury. Ann is chairman of the Southbury Economic Development Commission. Let's see, when this reaches 2 minutes, will someone please have me stop me? The question I have is one of logic and reason. The town of Southbury has the opportunity of purchasing a turnkey facility that would check out all the boxes from conversations of all the hard work the strategic plan force and I was part of. Take a look at the money spent on a town-wide survey. The public would like a community place for recreation. This is the beginning of a community center campus that will enrich the residents of our town. With the amount of land included in this purchase, you can use this as an anchor for or building block for many other additions if thought out properly for our residents in the future. The additional monies spoken of to rebuild and refurbish the current town pool is so exponentially greater, and with building and construction costs are always greater than expected. Why are we considering entering a money pit where we have a diamond in the rough? Why would the conversation, not consider taking a percentage of what was considered to be spent to upgrade the town pool and consider our seniors? Turn that building minus the pool into the state-of-the-art senior center with a transportation system benefiting all of our seniors and in closed confines in Heritage Village. Now is the time to work on a project that is twofold. Purchase Edward and convert the town pool building into something special for our seniors population at minimal cost. That's that one, I think. Number 4, please. From John Gray, 21 Patriot Road in Southbury. Thank you for your service to the town of Southbury. Your diligent and hard work during this year's budget cycle has not gone unnoticed. Your stewardship of taxpayer funds is the cornerstone of our effective and efficient town government. Regarding the funds set aside for the Edgewood purchase, if the Edgewood project falls at referendum, what is the process for rebating those unused funds, $2 million, to the taxpayers? I am against the town rolling those funds over into some rainy day slush fund. Number 5. From Cindy Keegan, 169D Heritage Village. I am in favor of the option to purchase Edgewood Pool and Recreation Center. What will be the future plan for the Ballantyne Pool and Complex if Edgewood is purchased by Southbury? Number 6, please. From Gabby Addison, 974 Southford Road. I urge the committee to vote in favor of the purchase of Edgewood. For some time, the cost to rebuild the Ballantyne Pool has been of great concern. The question of whether you would rather have higher taxes or no pool in Southbury is challenging. Let's see, I was delighted when the Edgewood opportunity presented itself. This will be an asset for our town for years to come. Thank you. Number 7, number 8. We'll do number 8 and then we'll, okay. Number 8 from Jake Addison, 974 Southbury Road. As a young voter, I recognize the economics of the pool and believe that buying Edgewood makes good sense, and I look forward to using it. Thank you. Number 7, Pete Addison, 974 Southford Road. I believe the purchase of Edgewood is a sound financial decision by our town. Aside from the potential to actually make money, the people are gaining a great value. Where can you buy something that costs $1,500 a year for $350? Thank you for your consideration. And last but not least, number 9, from Maureen Nee, 54 Fieldstone Way. Let's see, it looks like the purchase of Edgewood is a win-win for all. Great job in coming up with this option. And were there any others after that?
No, that was it, John.
I think so. Okay, thank you, Dan. Let's see. The next on the agenda is an Edgewood discussion. But before we do that, with your indulgence, Officer Grill from the police department, Corporal Dorillo, is here. There's been some questions about the status of the 24th, I believe it is, police officer in the budget. And rather than have Officer Grillo hang around, why don't we hear what he has to say, maybe, and all our questions might be answered by him. We can consider that piece, and then we'll move on to the agenda. If there are no objections, is that okay with everybody?
Yeah.
I'll wait to hear anybody object? Okay. As I understand it, last year, the Board of Selectmen and the police, based on the police department's request, added 2 officers to the budget, 23 and 24. This past year, it came to pass that we didn't add that 24th officer, I guess for a variety of reasons. This year, the police department again put in the request for the 24th officer. The first selectman decided he didn't believe that was appropriate, so he did not recommend it to the Board of Selectmen. And the Board of Selectmen voted 3-3 to not overturn the first selectman's recommendation. Last year, the Board of Selectmen did overturn the first selectman's recommendation. So Officer Grillo did come before the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen at the Board of Selectmen's department hearing and talked about that discussion about why they made the recommendation and about the history. And I'm wondering if there's anything, first of all, Officer Grillo, is there anything special you would like to add to the comments you made at those sessions? And then I'll open it up to Board of Finance members and Board of Selectmen members for comment. So, Officer Grillo, do you have anything for us?
Hi, this is Chris Grillo. Thank you, Mr. Michaels. In addition to what we spoke about at the last Board of Selectmen Board of Finance meeting, I just want to let everybody know that I did go back and look to see if there was any updated stats as far as federal stats, state stats for the most recent year. The state stats and the federal stats are still behind. There's nothing updated compared to what I gave everybody last year, and I provided again this year. So if the stats from 2017 from the FBI seem a little outdated, that's the last that they have available. Other than that, nothing's changed. Like Mr. Michaels said, we had 23 officers Last year, we went before the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and asked for a 24th. The reason we asked for the 24th was not to fill any patrol spots. We are very good with patrol. The reason we went for the 24th is we feel that the town of Southbury needs another level of service to better serve them, and that's a detective position. Currently, we have all patrol officers and we have 3 corporal supervisors. There's no detective to do any of the larger investigations. So again, the 24th officer, that's what we're looking to do is use that position to form a detective position that doesn't currently exist. And I think that's important. Everybody know it's not a position that currently exists. It's a position that we feel that the town needs both as a level of service and both as a level of liability. So again, it's not something we have. It's a position that we're looking to create.
Okay, the Board of Selectmen was 3-3. They really didn't decide to overturn Jeff's request. Jeff, do you want to offer a couple of comments before we open up with questions from members of the Board of Finance?
He's coming.
Only that we had asked for some documentation from the PD last year. We have not received that. And my feeling was that we have hired 10 new officers. The question is, those officers currently see their cases through, much like a detective would. They see their cases through, they follow their cases, and they're able to achieve that. They're able to get these cases worked through the system. And I do not believe that there's a need for a detective's position. That'll take a lot of the legwork that we pride ourselves in the Southbury Police Department. And one of the recruiting tools we use is that you get to see your cases through to fruition. It gives them a sense of pride of learning. I know in the past there's been other officers who have mentioned how well it worked in Southbury, being able to see their cases through.
Okay. Are there any questions or comments from members of the Board of Finance? Anybody? Does Dick Hill, did you finally make it into the meeting?
No, Johnny did not.
Huh. That's a shame. Well, I know Dick has always been in favor. I don't know what his question might be. Any other members of the Board of Finance have any questions? Unless we, yes.
John, it's Bill Tolley. It might be worthwhile to hear one of the 3 selectmen who was in favor of hiring the detective.
Good idea. Would one of the 3 selectmen
We
give
need
us a recap?
If you're going to
John.
speak, we need your name, and you need to be able to speak enough so we can hear you, because we can't hear that person.
Jason Bucksbaum.
Yes, Jason, go ahead, please.
Thank you, John. So this came to the Board of Selectmen last year. Just to correct something that was said earlier, the police department was funded at 23 officers, and last year the police department requested 25 officers. They requested 2 additional officers. There was extensive discussions with the Board of Finance and the police department. A lot of data was provided and reviewed, and ultimately the Board of Selectmen determined that the detective position was important, that it was a public safety enhancement for the town. This is not a cost savings or anything. It was never sold as that. It was a public safety enhancement to provide a better level of service to the town. So we said we would fund 1 additional position instead of the 2, and we went to 24 officers. That recommendation, and that was a 4-2 vote. That also was the same situation. That was not in the first selectmen's budget last year. That recommendation went to the Board of Finance. The Board of Finance then unanimously approved it, and it's been in the budget the past year.
Dick Hill
is now joining.
Sorry, it's been in the budget the past year, and it was unanimously, not unanimously, it was overwhelmingly approved at referendum. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that this is not an addition to the budget. If the Board of Finance put this officer back in, it's actually a budget cut to the police department to remove this officer. I've been a strong proponent of adding the officer over the past year. The police departments have been asking for a number of years. I think we generally look to the expertise of those in our town, as we've done with other budget line items. And I think, especially for public safety, and especially, given what we see around us, I think a public safety enhancement would be a good thing for our town. We should listen to the professionals, and I would strongly advocate that the Board of Finance add this back into what's already a very responsible budget. Adding this police officer in will still be a negative budget increase. It'll still be a decrease to our budget if you add the officer back in. So that's where I'm at.
Mike Rosen.
Yes, Mike, go ahead, please.
Thank you, John. I just want to, so I felt so strongly, I was also one of the selectmen who voted in favor of keeping this in the budget. And I felt so strongly about it that I actually voted against the overall budget in protest. Because this is such a responsible budget, it is certainly not the time to be sacrificing public safety and reducing the budget of our PD. Public health, protecting public health and public safety, is arguably our most important job as members of the Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance. And I would echo Jason's sentiment that we should be listening to our law enforcement experts who say that we do need this. This is the second year in a row they've said it. That it would improve and enhance public safety, and I'd urge the Board of Finance to follow suit. Thank you.
Emily Harrison.
Yes, Emily, please go ahead.
Thanks, John. Perhaps these are questions that Officer Grillo can answer. I think that the two things that I see with this that raise some concern for me is that we're talking about this position specifically as a detective. And my understanding is that as we went through contract negotiations this past year, that for a department who feels so strongly about this and had it in a budget last year, which I was not a part of, but that they didn't put this in their contract negotiations, which says to me that that really wasn't important. And two, my also understanding is that we pay for detective services through the state of Connecticut with the relationship that we have there. And so if we're best using our tax dollars and we're already doing that, are we gaining by adding this 24th officer in rather than taking the full benefit of the state services and really leaning on that, which we already are financially allocated for?
Thank you, Emily. Anyone else on the Board of Selectmen like to make a comment? There's someone in the background. Could you mute your microphones, please, if you're not speaking? Thank
Hi,
you.
this is George Bertram. I'd like to make a comment if I may.
Yes, please, George.
I was the selectman liaison to the police contract negotiations, and I can verify what Emily has just said, that the issue of detective was not brought up by the department in the police contract negotiations. And they went very well. I thought it was a very peaceable agreement between us. I didn't sense there was any animosity at the end. So I think that everyone should be okay with that. However, I also am concerned with Jeff's comment about how we currently manage the police department and we allow the officers to do their own detective work. And I'm concerned that all of a sudden now we're talking about changing that policy and bringing in a detective, and it sounds like it's fairly disruptive. I mean, that's a big change. I'd certainly like to know more about that. And finally, I would say this is a difficult budget season, perhaps. We don't really know exactly what's going to happen with our tax revenues coming up as the coronavirus has certainly impacted our economy. So I'm not thinking this is a good time to be adding extra stuff to the budget. I support the police 100%. We have a great police force in town, and it it's hard for me to come out and say this sort of thing because I want to be supportive of the
Dick
police.
Hill.
I think in this
Is
case,
now exiting.
I would ask that the Board of Finance respect the vote of the Board of Selectmen and leave the budget as is. Thank you.
Okay, let me ask a information question from Dan about the budget. So everyone remembers, as the budget as it's laid out at this moment is minus 0.7%, minus $197,000 from last year. Let me ask Dan, if we were to hire the other officer, the salary, the pension and the fringe benefits and the armorer and the uniforms and whatever, what is the fully loaded cost for adding an officer?
Well, when we did the analysis last year, John, how we would look at it is as a first-year officer. So it would be about $130,000 all in.
130 all in for all the first time costs and salary
Benefits,
and benefits.
yes.
Okay, thank you. So if we did, we would still be minus, to George's point about the budget. That is about 1/2 of a mil, and it might mess with the mill rate just a tad, but probably not. Well, hold on. Let me look. Dan has this worked out, and I think mill rate, we're now looking at a mill rate of 0.2, isn't it, Dan?
Right now it's 0.2, John, yes.
0.2 mils, which is 0.69% increase in the mill rate. If we were to add $130,000 to the budget, we would still be in that area. It's a rounding error. We would still be at 0.2, assuming we don't do anything else tonight. So that's a point of information for all the board members. Any other members of the Board of Selectmen want to say something, or?
John, this is Jeff Manville.
Yes, Jeff, please.
Number one, we have not negotiated what it would cost if we were go to a detective's position. So that number we don't really know. You can add an entry-level police officer and figure that out, but we don't know what the negotiated contract or settlement with the PD would be. Secondly, I just want to say this. If you look at our strategic plan survey, the citizens of Southbury are very happy with our police department and the public safety aspect of the town of Southbury. Our cases are getting covered. They're getting solved. They're being worked on by a number. And I have said this once, I say it again. We need to give the new people that have been hired, there's 10 new officers that have been hired, let them get up to speed, let them get used to doing their work, which should help with the process of any detective work that they do along the way.
Mike Rosen?
Yes, Mike.
Thank you, John. There were a couple of questions directed at Corporal Grillo that I hope we're going to give him a chance to respond to, because I certainly think for an informed decision it would be important. And I think the core is, to Jeff's point and to others, if people think public safety is fine, why the request? Plain and simple. And you know, but there, I know that Emily had some questions as well, as did George. You know, in terms of the sort of the procedure. So I'd love to give him an opportunity to respond if he so chooses. Thank you.
Could you please Mike, could you reframe for us what you believe the questions you think Corporal Grillo should answer, and we'll let him answer them?
Well, Emily certainly had one question without question. Yeah. But there were multiple questions. George referenced procedure and having, you know, change in process, and that would seem to be complicated. I'd love to hear from the expert on that. And then Emily, if you want to restate your question, you specifically asked one, so.
Yeah, this is Emily. Really two questions. One, Officer Grillo, if you feel like this is an important addition to the police department, you know, I certainly am confused, or the read would be confusing as to why, if it's so important that as you went through the contract negotiations, this wasn't included, and it wasn't brought up then at that point in time when this 24th officer was already within last year's budget. That was my first question. And then my second question is, my understanding is that we pay for detective services through our relationship with the state of Connecticut Police Department. And so, some feedback there. And so are we not best utilizing Southbury taxpayer dollars by leaning into that more rather than just adding in a 24th officer as a detective?
Officer
Chris Grillo?
Grillo, it's all yours.
Thank you, Chris Grillo. Yes, those are all great questions, and let me start with Mr. Bertram. He's absolutely right. The contract negotiations I've been on a lot of contract negotiations since I've started back in 2002, and in my opinion, it was the best contract negotiation that the police department had with the town. Our relationship with the town and management is probably the best since I've been here, since 2002. So I hope this doesn't come across as adversarial, because our relationship is very good. But to answer both Mr. Bertram's and Emily's question, the reason why it wasn't negotiated in contract negotiations is because contract negotiation is a give and take. If you want something, you have to expect to give something up. And as a union member of the police department, we would never sacrifice a union benefit for something that's a benefit of the town. And we see the detective as an improvement to public safety. It's a benefit to the town. Maybe one officer is going to benefit from this position, maybe monetarily, maybe let's just say round numbers, $2,000. So a $2,000 benefit for one union member is not a negotiation that is worth it to the police department. We wouldn't want to give up something to get that when that position is favorable for the town. That would kind of like, to equate that'd be like us trying to negotiate something to get a speed trailer. Saying, hey, we'll forego our raises for the year if we can get a speed trailer for the town. It's the detectives is the same thing. So that's why it wasn't negotiated, because it's a benefit to the town, and if any, a minor benefit to one union member. So that's the reason why it wasn't negotiated. As far as the detective services with the state police, you're absolutely right. We contract with the state police through the resident trooper program. I wish that their services were more abundant than they are. They are taxed to start with. They are low in manpower. And we work all of our cases. We do utilize them when they're available, but unfortunately, there's a lot of times that they're not, or the case is big enough for a detective, but maybe not big enough for Western District Major Crime. And if I can say one thing about the detective position, because there's, and Mr., let me just kind of reference Mr. Manville's comment too. He's absolutely right. One great thing about Southbury is being able to work your cases. As an officer and an individual, he's absolutely right. Coming from somebody that rose through the ranks doing that, it's really enjoyable. However, now in a management position, looking down on it, it's not always the best thing. If you have a officer come out of the academy, he goes through field training, he's now on his own. Is he the best person to investigate a sex assault of a minor? Is he the best person to investigate a $40,000, $50,000, $100,000 larceny? Or would the town rather have somebody that has experience in investigation, is trained in sexual assault crimes and trained in financial crimes? Would the town rather that person be leading the investigation, or would they rather the person that's on patrol get it? The other issue is, you're on patrol and you're working a sex assault, or you're working a identity theft. A minor two-car accident comes in. You take that sex assault or that identity theft, you wrap it up, you put it in your filing cabinet, and you go out and you investigate something else. You come back in, you sit down, you open up your paperwork, and you start to investigate your sex assault or your identity theft again, and an alarm comes in. So you now put your paperwork away and you go check the alarm and come back. That's how it's working now, and that's why we feel that the detective position is a benefit to the town, because you have one person that can dedicate his time to work on these serious cases. It's not going to alleviate every officer from working cases. There's too much work in the police department for one detective to handle all the major cases. He's going to be a supplement to these major investigations to do the work when it needs to be done in a timely fashion. And that's our feeling on the detective. It's not an answer for solving all the major crimes or replacing the Connecticut State Police or replacing patrol from doing their duties. All those things are still going to need to be done. Adding a detective is going to give the town of Southbury a better product. It's going to give better investigations, and it's going to give a better product overall.
Emily Harrison.
Go ahead, Emily.
Thanks, Chris. Appreciate that. I hope you understand too. I mean, as a member of a family that's been involved in so many areas of, emergency services, appreciate what you're doing. I'm looking at the safety of our town. It's utmost importance to me. I know, along with everyone who's in this room tonight. My question, just as a follow-up, I've got to look at this from a taxpayer perspective, right? And that's what we're charged with. And you're saying that we're not getting everything that we need through our relationship with the resident trooper program. Again, do you feel like there's more that we should be leaning in on there if we're not getting everything that we're paying for? Is that how it's coming across to me? If they're telling us that it's too busy, but we're paying for that service. I mean, that sounds like a concern to me.
Yeah, Chris Grillo. Well, I think what you would need to do is look at the state police contract and see exactly what they promise. I don't have it in front of me, but I can't say that they promised that they would respond to, every single major investigation, nor do they have the manpower to. So, would we like them to provide more services? Absolutely. Can they? I don't think they can. I don't think that they're in a position where they can. But I still think it's a responsibility of the town to, whether they're providing it or not, to, give the same level of investigations and of service, whether the state police is providing it or the town of Southbury providing it. The citizens still deserve it. And I think that either way, the citizens still deserve to get those cases solved and at least have the the right intent to look at them.
If I may,
Please, Jeff, go ahead.
you're asking for a management style here in this government. When I came into office, we had a pretty significant overtime budget for the police department. And one of the reasons we had such a high overtime amount was that we couldn't fill shifts and people being ordered in, and we had to fill shifts. So we had to use overtime to fill those shifts. And I keep looking for some sort of a reduction in police overtime. Now, we have filled these shifts, and yet in our budget we have right now, we do not have a very big reduction in the overtime in the police department. It was said at one time that if we have a police detective position, that these cases that are running into overtime would be handed off to the detective would take them on, and that we would reduce some of a bit of that overtime. And I've yet to see any reduction, significant reduction in overtime costs in the police department. The other thing that bothers me is what I'm hearing in the beginning, one of the answers that Officer Grillo gave. It almost sounds like we're trying to negotiate a detective's position here at the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance. And again, it wasn't negotiated during the contract negotiations. And there's nothing that says that if that was to come before that a detective's position with a number of officers we have, maybe that would be an alternative other than adding an officer. But again, our overtime, once we filled the ranks, we still have significant overtime within the police department budget for covering whatever's got to be covering. So my question is also, like, now we're here and we're talking about getting cases solved. Have we had any unsolved due to lack of time to get these cases solved. Have we ever run into a problem? Not that I know of.
Thank you, Jeff. Any questions from any members of the Board of Finance?
Yeah, John Riley.
Yes, John.
Just going back a touch here. I heard the comment before about assigning a new officer to a complex investigation. Isn't there some type of practice or standing practice in the police department that if you do have a situation come up where an investigation has to be done that is above the head of the officer who may have initially responded to it, that the department can then say, I am going to take an officer with more experience and let him handle that without having to have the detective?
John Riley, I believe that's why we have a police sergeant and 3 corporals.
Let me offer a comment. We're really talking about the quality and the level of service for a department. The Board of Finance's function, as far as I understand it, is determine if a request for money to do something is proper, appropriate, and well-founded. And then we're supposed to find money to support it. I'm listening to all this back and forth, and the more I listen, the more I realize that the Board of Finance really isn't in a position to, for me anyway, to make that decision. This has to come from the administration and the legislative body, the leaders, the Board of Selectmen, and the First Selectman. So I'm just reluctant to say yes or no. I just don't want to do it because I don't know enough about all the ins and outs personally, just as a member of the board. So what we have here is a Board of Selectmen that's split 50-50 with very good reasons on both sides. Very good reasons on both sides. So the Board of Selectmen, quote, doesn't give us a firm recommendation. So what do we go back on? I guess we have to go back on the recommendation of the First Selectman because the Board of Selectmen didn't overvote his recommendation. That reasoning, though, does put aside what the prior Board of Selectmen decided 4-2. Well, this is a new Board of Selectmen, new eyes, new thoughts, new thinking, and it's their responsibility to come up with a recommendation. So I am loath to overturn the Board of Selectmen's recommendation personally. Any other thoughts by members of the Board of Finance, one way or the other? Oh, and Bill. Yeah. I understand, if I might, Bill Tolley, Brian Emmerich has joined, I understand. So keep participating, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Joan here. Joan,
yes,
I have
Joan.
A question.
Sure.
Well, two questions, actually. One was about the overtime. And is that partially a reflection of all the new people that I understood had to be paired with other officers for a while? And with training. And secondly, we got a long presentation about the difficulty of filling that 44 or the 24 number, whatever, and having to get 3 people at a time. If this were in the budget, what are the chances were that this coming year they would be able to fill that position? So those are the 2 questions.
As to the first question, I know Dan is working on what I would call the definitive overtime study. It is way more complicated than we could finish in a short period of time. But as to your point, It is true that when there is a training officer function, there is overtime to fill that doubling up slot, but that is a extremely small part of the overtime. But we don't know definitively what percentage that is because we haven't finished the study. And
Okay.
that's one. And what was your second question?
The second question was they weren't able to fill that position last year. And what are the chances that they would be able to hire enough people this coming year if it were funded?
Yeah, we had that discussion in depth at our last meeting, and there are economies of scale with searching for one officer is what Jeff and Cindy told us, and we certainly understand that. And the Board of Finance offered that after we had a further discussion, we very much might authorize going up with a class of 2 or 3, which would put us over the 24 if it was necessary to run an efficient search, because we looked at the history and we always seem to be down. So I don't know that we can really answer that question definitively. If we have the will, we could find them. But I don't know if we have the will yet.
Okay.
Anyone else on the board have any questions or thoughts?
John, it's Jason. Can I make another comment?
Sure, Jason, please do.
So on that point, and this is another one of the issues that concerns me here. The town has adopted this practice where we only hire 3 officers at a time. And it's something I've spoken out against at various Board of Selectmen meetings. So we're currently budgeted for 24 officers. We have 22 officers, and the town, it's not that they couldn't find an officer last year. The town never looked to get to 24 because we have this practice of only hiring 3 at a time. My additional concern of cutting the budget down to 23, understanding the town's hiring practice, is that we're now going to wait till we get down to 20 before we hire 3 more officers. And then to John's point that you just mentioned, we always seem to be behind the 8 ball. We catch up and we do well, and this administration has done a fantastic job over the last 4 years in hiring police officers and building up our police force. But then we go back again. So that's another concern I have about cutting this position, which is what this is. And I'll just make one more comment. Our ultimate responsibility is the public health, safety, and welfare of the residents of our town. And the residents listening tonight have heard that to accomplish this public safety enhancement would have no impact on the mill rate. It's a rounding error, is what I heard at the beginning of this meeting. So I think it's worth a rounding error for a public safety enhancement, and I would encourage the board to keep the funding. Thanks.
This is Jeff again.
Yes, Jeff.
Okay. When you look at hiring officers, you have to look at kind of projecting what you have for age, years of service, and if you think you're going to have a number of retirements coming up, you can ramp up on your hiring and get those people into the queue, if you will, get them on to the PD, and then have as your retirements attrition comes in, the number drops a little bit, and you still stay at a level. I've looked at the current police department structure and what impending retirements may be coming, and then you judge based on that whether or not you should go to that 23rd officer and there's always a float. People have to understand, a lot of times in most police department budgets, there is a number that's in there that is a float up and down from that top number, because you can't hire over the number you have budgeted. But there's always, you will find probably hardly any police departments that are at the top number that they are budgeted for in the department. Very few, only because they may hit that top number. Then there's some retirements and or people leave, and that number floats down. So if you look at the departments, the police departments are out there. There is no police department that maintains their department at the very top level of the number they're budgeted for.
Thank you, Jeff. Okay, we seem to be recycling information and discussion and points that we talked about before tonight and talked about at our other joint meeting. At this time, what we need to do is, as Board of Finance members, decide something. What would be appropriate if there's a member of the board that would like to make a motion that would be second and voted on, that we add the 24th officer to the budget. Again, to Jason's point, this would not change the mill rate by my calculations if we don't do anything else strange tonight, and I don't think we're going to. So if...
Hey, John, it's Tom Connor.
Yes, Tom.
So I'm a little disturbed, not by the officer thing, but by I mean, how often do we override a 3-3 vote in the Board of Selectmen? I'm a little disturbed by your original comment and the kind of a precedent of when something goes 3-3 in the Board of Selectmen, then the Board of Finance makes a decision. Is that standard protocol? Is that something we do very often?
We do it very, very, very rarely. We do, though, have a department head who, in accordance with the charter, has the responsibility and privilege of coming to the Board of Finance and petitioning us to address the recommendation that has been made to the Board of Finance from the Board of Selectmen. So the issue of disagreeing with the Board of Selectmen is embedded in our charter. So while it doesn't happen very often, it is specifically provided for.
Okay, thank you.
As I understand the way the charter works. So I guess,
John?
Yes, Dick.
Okay, I didn't know if I was on or not, but if the police officer isn't budgeted and the selectmen can work out their differences on a 3-3 vote and decide with some sort of a majority, then the money can be added anytime during the year, can it?
We could take it out of contingency. The contingency, that would almost eat up the whole contingency, but we certainly could. Yes, we could do that.
I'm sorry, John, we can't just add something and not, I mean, out of the general fund? You can't add to the budget during the year?
Yes, you can. You'd have to go to a town meeting to do it. You start with contingency and then go to the general fund. Yes, you can do that.
Okay, well, I guess one of my problems was when we had the prior discussion, and the discussion was around, well, we need to go hire 3 at a time. I guess I'm a bit concerned that we put the money in the budget and it just becomes part of the surplus at the end of the year because it's never used. Now, if Jeff sticks with their 2 to 3 people, then it won't be used. That would be my problem, okay?
I hear you. Let me go back. I'm going to call for a motion from someone. If there is no motion, we will move on and the budget as recommended will not change. Is there a motion from a member of the Board of Finance to add $130,000 in funding for an additional police officer? Is there such a motion? I do not hear one. Failing such a motion, we will move on to our next item. Boy, what is that feedback coming from, Ray? Okay, we are now on the next item, number 4 on the agenda, which is consideration of possible vote on the purchase of the Edgewood Bath and Tennis Club. The 4 of the members of the club of the task force are here. George Bertram, Tom Connor, Tom Marks, and Hugh Sullivan. They're here to answer our questions. They are not here to make a presentation. We have advised all the members of the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen, to the extent that they care about this particular proceeding, that where the information of the presentation was, where's the question and answers from the public was, and I'm going to assume that you've all done your homework, and you were ready to ask questions of the task force. I think, though, first, George may have a brief summary or some new information as chairman of the task force that he would like to share with us. George?
Hi, John. This is George. Yeah, we did get a quote. I shouldn't say a quote. It was an estimate from Aquatectonic. They are the company that looked at the Waterbury pool, and they were quoted in a paper article, the Republican American article, as saying that the pool could be replaced for $1.5 million. So what we did was hire Aquatectonic, the exact same person that looked at the Hamilton pool in Waterbury, to come and look at Ballantyne's pool and make an estimate as to what it would cost to rebuild Ballantyne's pool into a sort of a standard configuration in today's pool world. And they came back with a number at 3.9 million, I believe it was. And so now we have three what I consider engineering grade estimates for rebuilding Ballantyne. We have the Bennett Sullivan estimate at about 3.72 million. We have the Aquatectonic estimate at 3.9 million, and we have the Weston and Sampson estimate at 4.6 million, I believe. I'm not looking at the numbers, so I'm just going off memory here. And I think the average, when you average the three estimates we have, you get a number of 4.1 million. I think it's 4.12 million to be precise. But that's compared to the option to buy Edgewood at $2 million. So with Edgewood, you get all kinds of extra stuff. You get tennis courts, basketball courts, paddle tennis courts, a very nicely appointed pool house, parking. You get 160 parking spaces versus 60 at Ballantyne. And there is an option to expand the facilities at Edgewood if you so choose in the future. That's not part of our current plan. So that's the new news. The task force is confident now that the $4 million number that we were tossing around at the beginning of this project for rebuilding Ballantyne is a real number, a legitimate number. We've got three professional grade estimates on it, and I think it's a smart move, and frankly, a very fiscally responsible move to move ahead with the purchase of Edgewood. And I believe that, well, I know the entire task force feels the same way. We put a lot of work into this project. There's at least 20 documents on the town website, and there's like 4 or 5 more that we're adding, and we're continuing to work on it. So if anyone has a question, fire away. I'll try to answer it, or one of the other guys from the task force will tone in.
Before I ask for questions, I'd like to make 2 frame of reference comments for the Board of Finance members. First of all, our responsibility here is to determine, as in the other thing with the police, one, is this a wise and appropriate expenditure, and how does it get funded? It's not our job here to decide if this field house, because it's half a mile out of Southbury, whether or not that's a proper thing to do. And a myriad, there were over 100 questions brought up to the task force with lots of pros and cons, and there are lots of pros and cons. Our job is to say, is this a proper solution, this particular solution for the needed replacement of Ballantyne? And 2, how is it to be funded? As to how it's to be funded, if you all remember, we have earmarked money in last year, and maybe the year before, certainly last year's budget, to replace Ballantyne. We only earmarked $1.2 million back then, I think it was, or $1.4 million, I'm not sure which. But because we'll be looking at a unassigned reserve fund analysis by the fiscal office, shows there is more than sufficient money to take care of this $2,115,000 appropriation out of the unassigned general fund. So what that would mean is we would generate a extra expenditure in this budget and a matching extra revenue. So there would be no net change in the amount of money to be raised from taxes if we approve this. I just make that comment to put this thing in a frame of reference. So having said that, are there any questions of the members of the Board of Finance to anyone on the committee?
John, I have a question
Yes, Joan.
about procedure. I mean, I was under the impression, well, two. One, you need a final inspection of the pool come summer once there's water in the pool. Secondly, which I assume would probably pass, but secondly, it was my understanding this was going to go to a referendum. Now, if we vote for this, do we bypass the referendum? Do we still have the referendum? It's a procedure thing that I'm not clear about.
Joan, the procedure is the Board of Finance is providing a funding mechanism so that the Board of Selectmen has an opportunity to exercise the option to purchase the pool. So all we're doing is providing funding. This is not an authorization to buy. The Board of Selectmen will have to follow the governor's rules on whether or not they can have a referendum. I've been told that the Board of Selectmen has voted to have a referendum if it's legally possible. If it's not possible, they'll have to follow the process the governor provides, so that they might exercise the option or not on a timely basis. Your first question again had to do with the water in the pool. I don't understand that.
Well, I was under the impression there had to be a final inspection because the
yes.
Question
yes.
And that we assume it has to pass that final inspection.
Yes, that would certainly be on the checklist. I believe it is on the task force, and it would be done in May or June, I guess, long before the Board of Selectmen has to make a decision about what to do. So that inspection would absolutely be made. Any other questions from Board of Finance members?
John, I have a question. This is Kathy.
Yes, Kathy, go ahead.
Has there been a recent comparative market analysis on the property since so much has changed in the last 2 months?
George?
I will defer this question to Dan. He did some analysis of the value of the business and the property, probably 8 or 9 weeks ago. But there hasn't been anything recent. I don't know how you could with things changing so quickly. As a long-term view, we don't see that long-term the value of properties will remain depressed for, decades or whatever. I think the country will bounce back fairly quickly from this. And our concern really is that there's been talk of a backup offer, and if we don't exercise the option by July 31st, we may not have that option after July 31st. So I'm not sure how to answer your question. We have not, it's very difficult to do a evaluation of property values with what's going on. Dan, do you have any comments on that?
Hey, George, this is Dan. Kathy, to answer your question, we have not done a recent evaluation. But when we did do the evaluation, we took all of the sales of commercial real estate in Middlebury, and we took the cheapest per acre. That on top of how you would value this type of property. You wouldn't just value the real estate, you also value the EBITDA of the business. So we did a formula of the EBITDA plus the value of the real estate to come up with our valuation. And I believe that was well over what we are offering the seller. But no, we have not done a recent valuation based on current market analysis, but I don't believe that there were many comparable sales in Middlebury, even from the point of when we did our comparison to now.
I mean, has
Kathy?
anything sold?
Kathy, the task force folks let me sit down on some of their deliberations, and I was listening to what they were saying, and this came up. This question has come up, and several people asked it, and the task force talked about it. And I said, gee, guys, what is more important here? Are we getting a really great value on this piece of property, or does it solve our problem of how to, in a cost-effective way, replace Valentine? So for me, while it certainly is interesting and important to understand what the value of the property is per se, for the town, it seems much more important that this provides what we originally thought was a $2 million solution to a $4 million problem. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't think that's as important a question as what is it going to cost to replace Valentine?
Well, I realize that, but in all the analysis, has there been analysis done if we cannot open Edgewood? Let's say this thing lasts for 18 months and that puts us into September of 2021. How much would it cost the town not opening Edgewood for an additional year?
No, you mean Valentine. I'm sorry. Say that again.
I'm saying if we were to buy Edgewood.
Yeah.
And then we take ownership of it and we're not allowed to open up Edgewood all of next year.
Why wouldn't we be? Where did that? I've never heard that.
If this pandemic should go to 18 months and we're not physically allowed to, I'm not saying we wouldn't, but if the state of Connecticut says, yeah, no swimming for 2 years, has there been an analysis on what we would lose by not being able to open it, just as kind of like a worst case scenario?
I think about that from a financial point of view. How would it be different from what we would lose if we weren't able to open Valentine? I'm sorry, Kathy, I don't get it. I'm obtuse. If we can't open Valentine or Edgewood, what would we lose?
Well, if we didn't open Valentine, it would sit there closed up and we wouldn't spend anything. But if we purchase a piece of property and we're not able to start utilizing it, the payback period would take a little longer. I was just wondering because
that's interesting. I never thought of it that way.
Because everybody keeps saying how, we'd be able to make money on this. We'd be able to make money on this. And I'm saying we may not be able to for next year. I mean, eventually, yes, but not next year. So,
hold on, Kathy, I was part of the financial analysis with Dan about the making money. The town isn't going to make money. The town is going to stop losing money, which we now have with running Valentine.
Yes.
And the operation at Edgewood, any net plus they had each year would not go to the town. It's planned to go into a fund to replace physical assets to keep the place up.
Yes.
So okay.
I didn't mean making money like we're all going to retire. I meant that, if we own Edgewood for a year and we're not able to use it, we're still going to have to invest money in it for that year. What would that cost be?
Oh, yes, you would have to maintain it. Yes, you would. Just like you would with Valentine if you had to maintain it. I guess we don't have those numbers. I guess we have to insure it, and you wouldn't have to pay lifeguards and salaries, I guess. There would be some cost, just like there would with Valentine. There wouldn't be any different, I don't think.
Right, and it's tricky because there's revenue and other things going on with tennis and other things like that. So even if you didn't open the pool, I guess the question is whether you would do any of the other stuff. But I guess the total revenue. The total expense of the place. It's got to be, it's something like $200,000.
John?
Yes, who's this?
John Riley.
Yes, John.
Just a little different perspective here. What we're looking at with Edgewood or Ballantyne is a long-term issue. If you look at not exercising this option and moving with the Edgewood approach, then you come down to the point where it costs an additional $2 million to redo Ballantyne. Town, for a long time, has been losing money on the operation of Ballantyne. Add to that annual loss the amortized cost over a period of time of borrowing and paying interest on the additional $2 million. Because by taking the $2 million now that we put into the designated or undesignated reserve, okay, there's still $2 million more to redo it ourselves. Add that amortized cost over a period of time to the existing and likely growing loss on Ballantyne at this point. Now you have a different perspective with 350 people only using Ballantyne. What is it going to cost? How much is the town going to lose on an annual basis after rebuilding it and going and having to go out and borrow an additional $2 million plus? And what is that going to do to the mill rate?
Oh, I realize all that, but I guess, and I know that a 10-year-old structure is going to be in better shape than a 50-year-old structure. And I realize existing construction is much cheaper than having to build new. I get all that. But my point is, in this particular time, we have to make a fiduciary financial decision on what we should be spending our money on. And I would suggest that this is just not the right time to spend money, because we don't even know when we're going to be able to open up any pool, if we're even going to be able to open it up next year, because until there's a cure, they're not going to let people go swimming together or play tennis or do any of that stuff. So why would we start an adventure that we might not even be able to do anything with for like 2 years?
But what you are looking at is a trade-off between the potential additional expense for one more year, even if this thing does go into 2021,
yeah,
versus the additional cost or the additional benefit of owning this at a lower cost and a lower taxpayer expense for the next 20 or 25 years. I look at this and I think we have to look at this as a long-term deal and look at the trade-offs.
Hey, Kathy and John, this is George Bertram. I would say that people are playing tennis and paddle tennis right now at Edgewood. I mean, I've been up there and I've seen it. They're socially distancing and everybody's quite happy with doing that. Susie Jones, the owner, is planning to open this pool this year. Whether she can or not, I don't know. I'm not even aware of a restriction on swimming pools. So I think the assumption that everything at Edgewood will be shut down for 18 months is not based in reality at this point.
I'm saying I'm giving you a worst case scenario. I mean, right now we're at the top of our curve, hopefully, and everything looks like we might be good. But we could also, until there's a cure, this bad boy is going to come back again and again. So I think we have to be a little bit more cautious than we've been in the past, because this is something that only comes around every 100 years. And I think it's kind of foolish to just say, yeah, this is a good investment, let's do it, and let's hope for the best, because we don't even know how many businesses are going to be able to pay taxes this year. We don't even know how many people are going to be able to pay taxes this year. We don't know really how much money we have. So $2 million on a pool that we might not even be able to use, even if it's a great deal, and it is, I think it's a little foolish.
Kathy, hold on if I might, guys. We've talked about this particular Kathy's point for a few minutes. We can come back to it and we'll all get to talk about our eventually conclusions at the end. But I'm wondering if there are any other members of the Board of Finance who have any questions about the facts and the report of the pool task force. Are there any others? Any other questions from anybody? Wow.
Hey, John, this is Mike Rosen. I don't know if this is the appropriate time for me to ask
Please
for
do,
a point,
yeah, sure.
point of clarification. And to your point in terms of the presentation of the task force, and actually George and I emailed about this earlier today. One thing I'm not clear about is the numbers that George just quoted, and what's been used all along is the $2 million solution to a $4 million problem isn't what the task force found. What it found was that Edgewood was a $2.1 million solution to one of a variety of options, a $2.3 million problem, a $2.58 million problem, a $2.69 million problem, a $2.9 million problem, $4.6 million, or $3.7 million, none of which were formal proposals or negotiated prices. I just wanted some clarity on that front. And I know and they're apples to oranges. Some of them were deemed too small, et cetera. But I just want that clarity. The task force didn't find a $4 million from the presentation, a $2 million solution to a $4 million problem.
George, could you remind us, please, of the thing you started off the meeting with? Do you have that summary sheet that you made up in the press release that Dan could show us of the four numbers, the three different bids and the average?
Dan, you should have that in your email. I could send it to you again if you want. Or where do you want me to send it?
If you could send it to Betsy's email, George, and then she could pop it up on the screen.
I think to Mike Rosen's question, certainly there are rounding errors in the 2 to 4 thing, but the task force issued an addendum. I think it was today. Was it, George?
Yeah.
After they received the report. After they received the report, that's new information.
And that's exactly what I'm looking at. I have that in front of me.
And there is a spreadsheet at the bottom of the report which shows the analysis that the committee decided, as I understand it, were relevant. Hugh Sullivan is here, and he can tell us why some of the lower numbers really weren't taken into consideration by the committee in the end. So why don't we look at the bottom of that sheet of paper? Whoops, there it is. George, you want to tell us what this is? And then Hugh, could you talk about the lower figures after George finishes? George, please.
Okay, this shows 3 different estimates. You have the Bennett-Sullivan estimate, the Aquitectonic estimate, and the Weston and Sampson estimate. Weston and Sampson estimate came in first, and it was a shock to everybody. Now, this is a cost to rebuild as a new pool, the Ballantine pool and pool house. Weston and Sampson had a lower number, I believe it was around $3 million, to just repair the pool, but it was felt by all the experts, and even Weston and Sampson, that repairing the pool was not really a good option. The safe solution was to rebuild it. So we looked at Weston and Sampson's numbers and said, wow, those are awfully high. We thought they were just, a little bit out of whack. So we contacted a couple of local pool companies, and they came in and gave us numbers, the numbers that Mike Rosen is referring to, and they were quite a bit lower. They were, the $2.5 million range. I think 2.6 was whereas 2.7 was the one that was closest to actually replacing Ballantine the way it would need to be replaced. So we looked at 2.7 and we looked at 4.6. We said, well, that's really, how do you make sense out of that? So at that point, we contacted Bennett Sullivan and we got involved with Hugh. Hugh Sullivan came on the project. And just as a side note, Hugh Sullivan was and he can correct me, the wording on what I'm going to say here, but he was the architect of the Edgewood facility. He didn't do the land site engineering, but I guess Hugh was the project manager, and so he really knows Edgewood, and he knows about pools and pool houses and decking, and so he has some experience, very direct experience in that arena. So we thought he'd be a very good arbiter to come in and look at the Weston and Sampson numbers, look at all the what I would call residential pool builder quotes, and sort of give us an arbitration between them. So he did that, and I think he worked with his partner, Kevin, and they came up with a number of 3.7 that you can see on this list at the top. So we were pretty satisfied with that, and we were kind of going along and using that as our baseline number. But we got some pushback from people on the Board of Selectmen and also some citizens saying that, well, we don't quite believe that. We think it's too high. You can do better. So at that point, we looked at who do we get to be a third estimate? And the name that jumped at us was Aquatectonic, because we knew that they were the company that Waterbury had hired to look at their pools and estimate for their pools what it would cost. And they were the company that was touted as saying it would only cost $1.5 million to replace the Hamilton pool. Now you got to keep in mind that the Hamilton pool is only 60% the size of what Ballantyne's pool currently is. So it's a lot less expensive, but still that number was in the paper and people were throwing it around saying, oh, okay, you can get a pool for 1.5 million. Why are you saying it's going to be 3.7 million? So we called Aquatectonic and we actually got a hold of Bill Simmons. Bill Simmons was the fellow, he's the head of their pool division. Aquatectonic is a division of Lathrop. I'm not sure exactly their name, but it's a pretty big architectural firm out of White Plains. I think they're in White Plains anyway. But Bill was the same guy that went up to Waterbury and gave Waterbury their estimates. So he knew what he was talking about there. The first thing he said, well, in Waterbury, I told him 1.5 million was the cost for a pool, but it didn't include the decking, it didn't include a pool house, it didn't include lighting and all those other extras. So it wasn't really a apples to apples comparison to anything. So he took a look at our project at Ballantyne, and he came back just yesterday with a number of 3.998 million, call it 4 million. So Hugh Sullivan suggested that we average out the three estimates, and that's how we got the 4.12 million average. And that's the number that I'm comfortable with. These are three companies that have no conflicts of interest. They're all just looking at, okay, what's a realistic cost to build a pool like this? They all have a lot of experience with large municipal pool projects. They're well qualified to do this. And as the task force is very comfortable with this number, I will turn it over to Hugh if you want to add anything to what I said.
Just that the smaller residential companies that submitted bids to you, what I could gather from their submissions, although they were limited, is they didn't have zero entry components to the pool for ADA accessibility. They didn't have decking in the manner that would be compliant with the code based upon the size of the pool. They didn't have any detail or didn't have a pool house that would have been handicapped accessible. And so they were deficient in our opinion in terms of the costs they submitted. They generally just seem to be for the cost of a pool, and some of the primary requirements that would have gone with the pool. They took it upon themselves to make it a pool that was a single depth at 5 feet, rather than having a shallow and a deep end. And But they were just deficient in our opinion, and I reviewed out the ad hoc committee.
Tom Marks.
Yes, Tom, go ahead, please.
Thanks, John. Mike, I want to get to, I think, what the heart of your question is, and apologies if I've misunderstood it, but I think what you might be asking is, how did we baseline spec these? And we did use Hugh's advice to establish a set of specifications so that we could provide those to Aquatectonic. They're the specifications that Weston and Sampson worked off of. They're the specifications that Bennett Sullivan worked off of as well. I think what you might be getting at a little bit in your question is that it is true, there are infinite configurations for this pool. And I think one of the perhaps challenges is if you don't start with a consistent baseline of specifications, it's going to be very hard to establish costs without moving to that design phase. And I think that's maybe something that's missed. Before we get people to actually put a very fine point on things, Hugh, someone of Hugh's, like an architect, and Hugh, you can talk more to this, but we would have to move to a design phase that kind of specifies the exact pool that we're looking for. And obviously that was premature at this phase, and that comes with a big price tag. So in order to compare apples to apples, we did ask Hugh to give us a consistent set of baseline specifications. And those specifications are in line with what it would actually be to replace Ballantine as it currently stands. With one major difference, and that is currently the Ballantine pool is not ADA compliant in that there's no entry point for handicapped access. Our chair lifts are not working. We don't have sloped entry. So those had to be designed into this process, even though they're not currently at the Ballantine site. In the Aquatectonic and the Bennett Sullivan quote, they work in sloped entry like they have at Edgewood. So other than that cost consideration, which we would have to do if we rebuild the project anyway, the set of specifications we worked off of were as close as we could to replicate what is currently on the Ballantine site.
Thanks. It's Mike Rosen. Thank you, Tom. And I don't question the work of the entire task force, by the way. The point that still wasn't addressed, though, for me is anytime you do a process like this, generally, you sort of throw out the low bid, you throw out the high bid. And then you look at the ones in the middle. And there's still, and I see the consistency that, and I have tremendous respect for you and for Kevin and the work they've done in town. And I see the consistency. So they said you're going to build a 3,000 square foot, pool house, and it's going to cost $825,000. That's what that's across the pool company A, pool company B quote 1, pool company B quote 2. I assume it's the same price built into the Weston and Sampson quotes, et cetera. There's one quote that in here though for $2.69 million that has a pool that's bigger than the Edgewood pool, with a 3,000 square foot pool house for 2.69. And I understand and I agree that the zero entry pool is preferred, but it's not necessarily required. You just need to have accessibility. So I'm just still trying to figure out how the determination was made of what to sort of discount as not a good, and it sounds like it was really use expertise was ultimately relied upon to say, we think this is probably not going to, they can't really do what they say they're going to do. The second thing, and then I'll just turn it back to you guys, is the issue. I had very good conversations with Tom Connor and Dan Colton about this, and it does sound like that the inability and the loss that the town has at Ballantine each year is largely attributed to an abundance of lifeguards that we have there, and much, if not all of that, could be mitigated regardless of which pool we have. And that's it. I'll just leave it to you guys to continue. I just wanted to share that because I'm still not clear, frankly, on how we dismissed some of the bids that seemed much more closer unnegotiated to the $2.1 million acquisition price. So thank you.
Michael, this is George Bertram. I'll say a few things and then I'll ask you to respond as well, I think. If you look at the 2.7 or 269, whatever it was, that, and then you compare it to the one a little bit lower, and you look at the price differential and the size differential, I looked at that closely and I said, you know, they kind of threw that 2.69 out at the end when we were talking with them, because we were pushing them to actually quote the same size pool. But if you look at the price differential, it comes out to about $111 per square foot of pool area. And I know from talking to people and researching that a pool is at least $200 and more likely $250 a square foot. So when I saw that, I said, well, they're not giving me a straight answer here. And that really shot their credibility in my mind. So when I saw that, and then listening to Hugh tell us about what it really takes to build a $4 million pool and how much work there is in testing and all the steps, and these are not simple projects. So I basically just, in my mind, any of the, I call them residential pool companies, I just dismissed their numbers. I didn't think they were valid. And now we have 3 top grade quotes from very reputable companies that have no conflicts of interest at all. And they all kind of line up, at least within some margin. I mean, there's definitely a variability even between those. But I think the average is a good number. So, I mean, that's a little bit of detail of what went through my mind.
I appreciate it, George. Thank you.
Hugh, you do have anything more you want to add?
Some of the smaller companies just weren't aware of the requirements of the code in construction, and they would have certainly learned about it very quickly with the building official, as well as the structural engineers and the pool designers, is that, you know, they would have to coordinate compaction tests. They would have to coordinate the testing of concrete or the gunite they used. They'd have to coordinate submittals for the reinforcing steel. They'd have to coordinate the inspection of the work before the concrete was being poured. This is not the type of work that these smaller companies are used to doing on a municipal project.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the Board of Finance with any questions from the about the task force report or of the task force members? Wow, here is everybody there? It's
John,
very quiet.
John, it's Jason, not Board of Finance, but I do have a couple
Yes,
questions.
Jason, please, yes.
I went back and read the Weston and Sampson report today, and I have a question about the pool house, and it's probably, I guess, best directed to Hugh. When I read the Weston and Sampson report, it outlines a number of deficiencies and then outlines a number of items to repair to be able to bring it up to ADA compliance. And I'm just curious how we get from that to having to demolish the building, start new, and build a whole new bathhouse.
Well, when I looked at the existing 1,650 square feet that's there, the building itself is deficient for handicap accessibility. Predominantly, a person that's has disabilities does not have the ability to come back into the men's or women's areas without seeking guidance to come through the administration area. It's not supposed to be that way. Also, when the building code requires you to create occupancy loads for the size of the pool, the size of the deck, and the size of the building, and that creates a total occupancy load that determines how many toilet and plumbing fixtures you're supposed to have in the building. And based upon what's there now, the building is deficient with its fixtures. So by the time you start creating accessible dressing rooms, additional toilet areas, toilet rooms, and sinks for compliance with the plumbing fixtures, the building gets larger. And I then learned through just speaking with members of the board here or the ad hoc committee, is that they needed areas for storage as well as areas for like a break room for the lifeguards. And we determined that a structure of 3,000 feet would need to be designed for a redesign.
John, Brian?
I mean, again, what I've told the ad hoc committee is I said Ballantine Pool and the Ballantine Pool House was designed and constructed in 1972 for a population of 9,000 people. If you were starting off today for a new project, you'd have, different requirements than they had in 1972. And it's done a wonderful job for the last 50 years.
John, this is Brian.
Yes, Brian.
I just want to say I'm not sure how much I can add to the discussion other than the fact that I've read the report from the committee, and I have to say that it was, in my opinion, it was extremely well done, well thought through, and the numbers intuitively seem correct to me. And having seen both of these locations, I have to say that when I read the report, there was no surprises in it. The Ballantine location is a very dated location, has been for many, several years, even when my kids were young. And I've also had a chance to see the other location as well, the Edgewood, and that impressed me from the very beginning. So nothing in the report really surprised me, other than to say that I thought that they did a great job with it, and I agree. From my limited experience with this, it fit with everything that I know about it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from any other Board of Finance members? Okay, hearing none, because there's no reason to prolong this. And again, we are just authorizing the funding if we vote this. It is still up to the Board of Selectmen to decide whether or not to go forward with the project, either through referendum or whatever. So we're just doing the funding piece. If the project does not go forward, then the funding that has been applied would go back to the reserve to be handled over next year, the general fund. So let's try this. The chair would entertain a motion to add to the town budget $2,115,000 for the for the Edgewood Pool project, and add as a revenue from the unassigned general fund $215,000. That would be the motion that would one, provide the funding and cause the town budget and mill rate, the town mill rate net to be unchanged. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Well, it sounded like Riley and Connor. John Riley made it. Tom Connor seconded it. Say again, Brian.
Yeah.
Brian Emmerich seconded it. Okay. Is there any further discussion?
This is Dick.
Yes, Dick.
What was it, 200 and something?
$2,115,000.
Oh, okay. That's the total number.
Yes, that's the grand total number for, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay. Kathy.
Kathy, your nay is noted, though it doesn't count at this time, but that's okay. That we'll put it in there. And abstaining? Okay, thank you very much, all. We're now going to move on. Whoops, hello?
Who all voted for it, John? We can't tell it.
Everyone voted in the affirmative on the board. Tom Connor, John Riley, Brian Emmerich, Dick Hill, John Michaels, and Joan Gillespie.
Thank you.
Okay. While everyone's still fresh, because the IPOC thing I think is sort of simple, we'll put that at the end. I want to go to consideration of the adoption of the budget for next year. Dan, could you? We are going to go into whatever line items board members want to, but I'd like to frame this so everyone could see where we are before we start adding and subtracting. Dan, could you bring up the budget summary sheet so we could see that we are now, what, $197,000 less than last year? And we're 0.87 minus total cost of local government, all in, everything. And that would not change with the addition we just made. So that's one. The second thing, Dan, could you go to the mill rate sheet? And what we're looking at now, right there, would be the current mill rate is 29.1. We would need another two tenths of a mil to go to 29.3, and we would have a tax increase of 0.69%. That inclusive of the school board's budget as it was recently presented at the lower rate. What was it? I think 2.96 or something like that.
2.96, John.
2.96. Also, Dan and I are anxiously awaiting a text from the school board that is meeting tonight, and we understand there's a high likelihood they will pass their budget, but we will find that out before the night is over, hopefully. If not, we will have to have another meeting to set a mill rate, because we can't set a mill rate without a school budget. So again, the framework as of this moment is a minus $197,000 town budget from last year and a 0.69% increase in the mill rate. So, okay, are there any issues or questions that people, any specific department in the expenses? Let's do the expenses first, then we'll do the revenues, then we'll do the surplus. Are there any anything in the operating budget that people would like to ask Dan about, or the Board of Selectmen or the First Selectman? I love this.
This is Dick.
Yes, Dick.
You know, we got a bit of a problem with the new fuel tanks. Is there any change in the diesel and fuel because we're having to purchase it commercially? What's happened in that area?
Dick, this is Dan. Jeff Tinley had issued a letter to the state of Connecticut, and they had given us a 3-month reprieve on pulling the tanks out. So currently we are getting delivery to the tanks, so we are getting gas and diesel at the spot price that we get it at. So we're not having to buy it outside right now.
So the comment, there's no way they're going to change that deadline, isn't true then?
They cited because of COVID-19 that they were willing to do it.
Okay, well, that's what I wanted to do. But okay, so we got 3 more months to work out the problem with the planning. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Is there any movement on that problem?
I believe that they have not started anything yet, so that's where we're at right now, Dick.
Dick, I think it's John. To your point, at our last meeting, Jason Busbaum forced us to look at what the current budget request is for next year on a dollar cost for diesel, and I think it was, my memory is $2.45, and the current cost to buy diesel back when we had the meeting a month ago was $2.45. It's probably less now because of this screw up with oil prices, but I think the Board of Selectmen determined that they didn't need to make a request for more money for diesel if we had to buy the stuff commercially from Hein Brothers or someone else during next year.
With the drop in oil price, and it ain't going to come back for quite a while, I guess the question really is it possible to cut the fuel budget?
You're the fuel expert. I have no idea.
I'll guarantee you guys that the oil price is not going to come back very quickly. There's oil everywhere. And it's going to be down, and I would say it'll be down for at least a year. But okay, the question was, has that been considered? And I know we were getting quotes on fuel.
Dick, it sounds like Dan, who is you and Dan is I guess not of a mind to tonight make a recommendation to change. Dan?
All right, fine. That's fine. Let's move on then.
I would agree.
You know, basically, that's new information that we've got 3 more months to try to work the problem.
That sounds correct.
That's correct,
And
Ed.
there-
We have 3 months.
Did we ask for 3 or did we ask for 6 and they said take 3?
We asked for 3 and they gave us 3.
Oh, shoot. Okay, you could have got 6.
Does
All right,
anyone-
thank you.
Does anyone
John-
else on the Board
John
of
Bill
Finance have a question about anything in the operating budget, the expense part?
John, Bill Tolly.
Yes, Bill. Bill, could you speak a little closer to the microphone?
Yeah, I'll try. Can you hear me now?
A little better.
This is not a budget question. It is more an observation or a question for Dan to think about. I'm familiar with organizations that are starting to or have locked in forward prices on anything related to oil/energy. So it's not a budget question. It's not the same question as Dick was asking. This is more of a procedural matter for Dan to consider whether or not the town should consider forward locks on fuel prices.
And yes, Dick, I think that's something we will look into. And one of the other things I wanted to look into is actually getting together with the region and seeing if we can get a better quote, if we can quote it all out together with a higher volume.
Love it.
Does the region have diesel?
They do, yes.
I'm sorry, Bill, I cut you off. Go ahead.
No, that was it. I was just saying thank you to Dan. Just consider it in the future. Rolling together volumes for volume purchases is another good idea. But I'm seeing that more and more in the outside world that people are locking in prices while they're very advantageous. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great idea, Dick. I mean, Bill,
The
sorry.
the Board of Finance has deputized Dick Hill to work with Dan every year to decide for gas and diesel and heating oil, whether we should go spot market or do advance. So we would encourage, especially now based on that comment, we'd ask Dan and Dick to please pursue that. Any other questions on the operating budget? Hearing none, let's go to the revenues. Dan, could you bring up the revenue sheet? Here's the revenue sheet. Let's there a little large. Can you make it just a little larger? There you go. So we have, are there any questions about any of the revenues? It happens that Tom Connor and I have worked with Dan 3-4 times in the last month in person and remotely on a lot of these. Tom has worked on especially on the interest on the investments and on the FIA investments. Any questions from anyone about any particular one of these? We'll do the.
Sorry, John, it's Dan. One of the things that we did, I believe you, myself, and Tom, we kind of really, the interest on the STIF this year, we're not anticipating. So if you can see on the line 18, we have a budget last year of $400,000, whereas this year we're only budgeting $40,000 on our STIF account.
For those of you who don't remember, that is the town's average $20 million a year balance that we used to keep in CDs and checking accounts that we now have in the STIF thing.
And Dan, I think, so part of the reason why we went through this, besides the STIF too, was to go through and I think what we tried to do is look at the revenues in light of all that's happened, and try to look for any kind of downside kind of considerations that we could think of, given the given the current situation with COVID.
That's correct. What that resulted in is a very pessimistic view of what the last 3 months of the year, April, May, and June, will generate in revenues. And because of the Tom and Dan and I's belief, along with Kathy, I guess we just heard, that it's going to be a very slow comeback, that revenues of all kinds, at least the first half of next year, are going to be slow coming in. So we were rather conservative in those estimates of revenue across the line, town clerk fees, licenses, all sorts of things. So are there any specific questions of anybody?
Is line 19, is that the gain we have on our 9 million or so investment?
Yep, that is, Dick. That is, here it is right here. So this is the.
How much are we taking?
There it is.
282,000.
How much?
282,670, Dick.
And what is the value of the 9? Is it 9.7?
Right now, as of March 31st, the the market value was 9,982,000.
And as of Friday, it's like 10/1/12 or something like that, right? They
Yes.
just sent us that today, right?
Yes.
Well, I guess the question is, why are we only taking 282 off that?
It's based on a 20%, Dick, equity allocation. That's
Dick,
why.
if I might, Dick, if you remember, last year we decided that our practice would be to establish the reserve at a 20% equity level of investment, so that the IPOC would be able to go to 20%. And what that would mean is we would reserve, I think it's 199,500. Is that it? And we take that
Yes.
off of the difference.
The face value. So Dick, we're trying to keep a certain reserve buffer in there all the time to to buffer against downside loss, right? So and the buffer is determined by how much risk we might want to take. So that's why at the 20% level, that buffer right now is about 200,000, and so we're keeping the 200,000 in there as a reserve, and so the rest of it we could take out, and so that's why we came up with the 282,000.
Well, if you needed 200,000 buffer onto the 9, doesn't that leave quite a bit more than 260 or 282?
Well, it's moving around Dick, it's moving around all the time. It's moving around every day. So we chose, and and we used to choose end of year, but I think given it's moving so fast, we chose the end of the quarter. I guess, if for some reason some miracle happens and end of June it's beautiful, maybe we'll rethink a little bit. But for now, I feel like we think this is the best projection to do.
Okay.
Thanks, guys. Let's go back to the revenue sheet. Are there any other revenues that people want to talk about?
Well, I'm going to need to go to the expenses. I didn't get the chance to finish on that one.
I'm sorry, Dick. Let's go back to the expenses. Which one? What do you want to talk about?
Well, I need to look at the major projects reserve sheet. I don't think everybody's seen that sheet ever. And I asked Dan to have it available.
We're not going to have a major projects fund. We did it away. We did away with $190,000 allocation recommended to it. We're going to keep, rather than fund that with items from the unallocated general fund, the unassigned general fund. We're going to leave the unassigned general fund as we're going to address in a minute. So there is no such fund as was originally, as of now, as was originally proposed.
Well, but John, we've got 1.28 million saved as a reserve fund in that fund at the for next year. You got 1.28 that goes forward for other items. That's what I want to talk about.
Which fund? I don't know which fund you're talking about, Dick.
Well, I asked Dan to have the major projects servicing sheet up there that shows for the next 4 years what's going to happen to the money that we had, which we're not putting toward the budget. And we're saving it, just a minute, and we're saving it for water trucks for the fire department. That's what I want to talk about.
Dick, that recommended account is no longer under consideration. It's done away with. It's done away with. What we did was...
Just a minute, John. We started out, the unassigned fund was $4.78 million. And out of that, we fund Edgewood at 2.1, and we fund communication at 1.4. So we've still got, after you do that, out of that 4.78 million surplus, we still got 1.28 left over.
Dick,
and the question is, what are we doing with that 1.28?
Dick, I'm sorry, I'm not making myself clear. The sheet that you're looking at does not exist anymore. That was a thought that I in the fiscal office had, but because of your concerns and the coronavirus and the communications system, that account is not under consideration for this year. So throw the sheet away. It's got nothing to do with anything in this budget. Then we revert back to the unassigned general fund, and I think that is where your concern is.
Okay, well, let's see the calculation where we start with the undesignated fund. Dan comes up with what surplus will be for this year's budget. Then we work our way down for pension. We take some out for pension. We take some out for other things. And then we work our way down and we end up with something that we apply against as revenue. That's what I want to look at then.
It's right on the screen. Can you see it? It's right on the screen.
Let me see that. Yeah, let me see the top of it, where the number we start with, where we have
5,378,000. That's what the general fund was according to the auditors.
Okay, then we come on down and we subtract some items.
Yep.
Okay, and there's the pool.
Now the pool there,
wait a minute.
Dick, yes, these are last year's numbers. We haven't changed anything. These are last year.
Yes, I understand that. Then we come on down and we take more out for the extra money for Edgewood, I guess.
No, we have not delineated the quote extra money for Edgewood.
Oh, we haven't yet.
We have not. We have not. Let's go through this sheet and then I think I know what you're getting at, and I think I can explain it. I can explain it to you and the rest of the board members if you give me a minute.
Okay, fine, go ahead.
Okay, so what Dan has here is we've got the two earmarks on line 12 and 13 for the fuel tanks. Then we have last year's earmarks for pool, $1.2 million, which is now $2,115,000. We have last year's earmark for the communications upgrade, which is now somewhere between $1.4 million and $3 million. We'll talk about that in a second. Then we have the FEMA money, the excess FEMA money. And then we have the surplus that we got from last year. Those are all excesses. Okay? Let's go on down. Those are takeaways. And then, so that means we have earmarked all that stuff out of last year. Now, for this year, Dan's looking at a revenue surplus of $665,000.
Right, the old,
an
the
expense.
typical 1.5 surplus, okay.
Yep. And then we go down further. And we don't need any more money to fund the general fund because the budget went down. We need $289,000 for the pension. That leaves us with $1,264,000. And if we use the 3-year allocation of the 264, half next year, 33% the year after that, and 16% the year after that, that is how we would allocate all that money into the back into the general fund. Now let's go back. Well, okay. There you can see that the 632, that's the revenue. Let's go back to the fund balance and let's go back up to what Dick's concerned about. So we have reserved here, we have money available for, we have a little over $5 million of earmark for stuff. Now, the question becomes, without getting into a detailed analysis, bids and specs for all those earmarks, what are we looking at? We're looking at, well, how might we use that? We've got $2,115,000 for the pool. We've got somewhere between $1.4 million and $3 million for the communications. Let me talk about that for a second. I've had 2 conversations with Don Antilla, who is working with Dan and I think George and Corporal Grillo. Don Antilla is on when and for how much and for what system should we use to replace the communication system that's going to die on us in 18 to 36 months, 18 to 24, 18 to 30 months.
How does it die?
What?
How does it die?
It dies because the software is all out of service. I should ask Dan because he's more familiar. Ask Dan. Dan and George, are you involved in this at all?
Yes, John, I'll say that.
Thank you.
One of the big problems, this is George, is that you can't get spare parts. The parts are not available, or they're not going to be available shortly. So, I mean, it's like a system, I think. So you just can't get the stuff anymore. And without the spare parts, if something breaks and you don't have a radio system, so that's the biggest problem. Software issues, there's some there, but I think the biggest problem is just the mechanical electronic parts are just out of stock.
And isn't that with Motorola?
Yeah, but they don't keep things forever. I mean, you can't get parts for a 20-year-old radio today. I mean, that's
not a 20-year-old radio.
Well, it's pretty close. I can just tell you, Dick, that the parts that is the problem, and that is the concern, is that the parts are no longer going to be available.
So the task force was put together by the first selectman nine months ago to address this. Last year at this time, we thought it might cost $1.2 million. to do the upgrade because we had a letter from Northwest Communications that it would cost $1.4 million to do the upgrade as they understood it. So we put in $1.2 million because they told us at the time that, well, if everyone doesn't get new, and et cetera, et cetera. It has come to pass that the state has offered to do this for maybe less, but there are, the Georgia's task force has come to find out that when you try to combine the police department, the ambulance, and the fire department, they all have different issues relative to frequency, connectivity, interoperability, all sorts of stuff. And this task force is working. They know that, they believe now, I think George shared with me that somewhere between $1.4 million and $2.8 million, maybe $3 million, they don't know, it might cost to replace this thing.
All right, well, John, we're not going to know about the communication until about the end of this year, isn't that right?
No, I talked to Don Antilla, and he said they expect to have their answer by the end of September, close to the end of the year. Yes.
Yes, that was what I'd heard. Okay. All right, I'd heard the end of the year. Okay, 1.2 is coming off of the undesignated. Okay.
No. What do you mean 1.2, Dick? It's either 1.4 to 2.8.
No, okay, fine. Okay, there's 1.2 is right there right now. That's what I understand. Okay, it could be more. And obviously, since we've all voted that anything over $1 million, we might bond. So maybe if it's 1.8, we bond it and we, couple it with something else. But okay, 1.2 is there right now. Let's go ahead.
So between all these earmarks, we've got, what's the minus there? We've got $5 million.
Right, and just a minute, if we have a surplus in the current budget, I'm trying to understand this, just a minute. How is the surplus a negative? Is that what that is?
No, the surplus for the budget is, those are the earmarks. 5 million to earmarked for other things. And then you go down, that leaves you $88,000. Then you go to this year's operations where we've got $1,476,076 anticipated surplus. That anticipated surplus added to the $88,000 gives us $1.5 million. Then we take out of that the $12,000 for the general fund reserve at the 7.58. We take out the money for the pension. That takes $300,000 out.
I can see the rest of that.
Okay. So, are you good? You understand it? So what I am advocating, and I think Dan is advocating, that we take these earmarks of 5 million and there are 3 things that we ought to be thinking about. Well, there are 4 things we ought to be thinking about, but first is the pool at 2.1 million comes out. The second is we have this money in the bank and there's no reason to bond. There's no reason to bond for the communications, and we don't have to bond or take anything until we know what the number is. And I think we should just hold this money in the designated reserve until we know what it's going to cost, and then consider whether or not to use the designated reserve, which I recommend, or to bond it. Yes, we consider that. Then we've got the issue which everyone's talking about lately, about the economy, and are we going to run a deficit this year? And might we run a deficit next year when people can't pay their taxes because we've got 22 million people unemployed in the United States, and we don't know when the businesses are going to go back in Southbury or any place else.
Is the, Jesus, is the excess 1.9 million, which is deducted, is that so that we got money to pay the extra for the Edgewood and maybe pay more for communication?
Yes.
Why is that? Is that what that's for?
Yes,
That
Dick,
is-
that's what it's for.
Dan, why don't you explain, that's the number from last year and we didn't change it. Dan, you want to explain that?
So
do
Dick,
you
yes,
mean,
the
the number?
$1.9 million would be used for the difference in what we budgeted for the pool for Edgewood. And that what would be left over would continue to stay in the undesignated general fund until we decided to do the communications, whatever that would be, and then it would roll from the 1.9, whatever's left over, to that line as well. Which
Well,
was still,
instead of instead of putting 1.9 in there, why didn't we put 900,000, which the extra, no, it'd be, 900,000 for Edgewood that we don't have covered yet. And why didn't we put 200,000 more for the communication instead of subtracting 1.9? Then you'd have more down at the bottom to divide by
no,
4.
Dick, it would
Is
be
now
exactly the
exiting.
same at the bottom.
What?
'Cause it would be exactly the same at the bottom. I would just be moving 915 from the 1.9 up to the pool line for Edgewood. And then what would be left, we'd roll to the communications line so that the bottom number would not change.
So you're saying the 1.9 that's shown there, that covers the 2 projects. It covers Edgewood extra, and it covers the extra for the communication, whatever that is. Is that right?
That's correct.
So that says that we're thinking Edgewood is 2.1, and then we'd have $1 million left that we'd say then communication, we're planning on 2.2 for communication. Correct?
2.8, Dick, 2.8.
Oh, okay, well, if we're up that high now, I can see why that amount of money's there, but, John, we'll need to talk about bonding.
Yes, we will.
As an 84-year-old, I don't want to pay for something that other people are going to use for 20 years. That's what bonding's all about. Who pays for it? The current taxpayers out of the money that we took from them, or the future taxpayers? So we need to be talking about that down the road.
Dick, you are absolutely correct. And I would ask you to go look at the Board of Finance's memorandum called, it had to do with the, what was it? The name of it, it was partial bonding. I can't remember the name. The Board of Finance talked about this, and we said for the last 40 years, people have put money away so that we don't have to pay bonds today. So we are putting away in reserve funds the equivalent of what we'd be paying in bond.
I understand that,
Money.
John, and we haven't bonded for whatever it is, 10 or 12 years. But as a group, we talked about it. We said we're going to consider bonding for anything over $1 million. That's all I'm saying. We need to look at that.
Yes, we did, and we will. Yes, good point. So let's keep.
Okay, well, now I know where the money that was in the major project.
What the heck is that?
I don't know. It's off.
Okay,
Okay.
could someone mute? Okay,
Okay, fine. Yeah, you guys have gone through it.
Okay.
I don't know that I agree with all that, but I didn't know that you're gonna expect that the communication might be over $2 million. That's the new number that we didn't know about.
that's correct.
I didn't know about it.
Okay, so let's go back to the revenue sheet. So we've been through the earmarks. We've been through the revenues. We've been through the surplus drawdown, where that came from. We just went through that. So there we are. And then we go to the budget, the mill rate sheet, where we've got the 62, 161. If you go all the way up to the top, you look at because Dick's going to want to know about this. The 62, 161 is the total money to be raised from taxes on the top of the revenue sheet. This year, we are taking away $250,000 like we did last year because we always over collect. That is problematic this year, but there's no way of knowing. And plus we have a little bit of money in the undesignated reserve that might cover some more shortfalls if we don't get that 250 or more than 250. So we're looking at collecting from taxes 61,911, and when you go down here to, let's see, if you establish a mill rate of 29.3, that is an increase of 0.2 over last year, which is a 0.69% increase in the mill rate. We would have a, quote, deficit of $47,000. Now, we could set the mill rate higher at 29.4, but we would be generating a surplus of 165. And we have always gone whichever is closer to zero. And the minus 47 is closer to zero than overtaxing for the 165. I hope Dick gets some small satisfaction in that. So the proposal with the expenses, the revenues, the earmarks, the general fund, and the mill rate that is before us is for a mill rate of 29.3. Any comments or thoughts on anything? We've been through the expenses, we've been through the revenues, we've been through the reserve funds, and the mill rate sheet. If there are no comments, what we should do is vote to adopt a budget of, and Dan, you've got to add the 2 million. The number is 22,423,079, and we have to add to that the 2,115,000, correct?
That's correct, John.
For the spending. So that would be 24,538,079. And what Dan will do, he'll add as a revenue piece in this. Let's not do it now on the fly because we got to put it in the right place and not screw it up. All we have to do tonight is approve the total spending. So if there's no other discussion, Chair to entertain a motion to approve a total town budget of 24,738,079. Is there such a motion?
John, just.
Yes, Nick.
What was the extra 2 million? Is that the money that comes out of the library fund and other things, or what?
No, that's the pool. That's we got to budget. We have to budget the appropriation for the Ballantine pool.
John, it's Dan. I just got a text from Joe Martino at the Region, and they approved their budget at 2.96.
Perfect timing. Absolutely perfect timing. Okay. Wow. So we have a motion for 24,538,079. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Who was that? Brian. Thank you, Brian. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Joan. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Abstaining? Whoop, Dick, did you abstain or oppose? Or was it
No,
delayed aye?
I said aye.
Was
I
it
said
delayed
aye.
Okay, I'm sorry. Was it delayed aye?
You know, it'd help if you would, just a minute, it would help if you called the people and they could all answer individually so we know who votes.
Sure, let's do that. Tom Connor?
Aye.
John Riley?
Aye.
Brian Emmerich?
Aye.
John Michaels, aye. Dick Hill?
Aye.
Joan Gillespie?
Aye.
Okay, it's unanimous.
Thank
Okay,
you.
now it also happens that the regional school district has voted their school budget as it appears in Dan's sheet down at the bottom. Is that not, well, on the revenue sheet? Can we go to that, Dan? So that's our share of the 72,909 is the budget at an increase of 2.96. Is that, Dan, is that correct?
That's correct, John.
So therefore, we now have a school budget in accordance with the governor's directives. We have a town budget and a school budget by the vote of the two fiscal authorities. We go to the mill rate, and the chair will accept a motion to establish a mill rate at 29.3. Is there such a motion? Thank you, Mr. Riley. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Tom. Any further discussion? Now let's do a roll call vote. Tom Connor?
Aye.
John Riley?
Aye.
Brian Emmerich?
Aye.
John Michaels, aye. Dick Hill?
Aye.
Joan Gillespie?
Aye.
Okay. We are done with this. The next item on the agenda is, let's see, review of, let's do the IPOC discussion. Dan, you think, or do you want to wait a little while longer? Tom, do you want to wait a little while longer?
No, I'm happy to go forward now.
Okay, the agenda is yours, Tom.
Okay, so a couple years ago, so obviously the whole investment environment has changed in the last few months in regard to COVID. So money market rates, the SIF rates are essentially zero, and they're going to be probably close to zero for a while. So we want to go back and in our reserve fund resume a kind of allocation that we did maybe a year or two ago when money market rates were very close to zero, change our allocation and put a certain amount of the money in short-dated investments and short-dated fixed income investments. So what I asked Chris and FIA to look at that, and they put together a suggestion of kind of reallocation of the a change at least in the target allocations for the reserve fund, and it's in the recommendations are in this sheet that was sent out. Previously, when money market rates were higher, we had target allocation. And is everybody can anybody hear? Anyway, we had.
You're not speaking. Can you go on mute, please?
So anyway, so there was the previous allocation was 45% money market, 45% a kind of limited maturity, a very short dated bond fund. Because at the time we weren't getting that much interest for going out along the curve. Now with money market rates down close to zero, we FIA and I agree feel like we'll get better returns by going out and investing in short-dated bonds. And so the recommendation is to go towards the allocation that we had maybe about 2 years ago, which is puts less money in the money markets and distributes the money amongst three of these short-dated bond funds. That's the main recommendation. We've also talked a lot about, and we've talked a lot about there being in this kind of situation, having some flexibility to up our equity allocation. If we thought it was a good time to buy. And so there's a second suggestion here to kind of gradually move our equity allocation from 10% to 15%. And so that's the gist of the recommendations. We were going to do it in time over 3. If you go down further in the sheet there, it'll show you. Keep going down a bit there. It sort of shows a kind of 3-step process where we would get from the current allocation to the new allocation. Notice that all we're changing is the target allocations. We're not changing any ranges. The ranges were there to do this all along. At some point in time to require us more, to give us a bit more flexibility. And I guess right now, did we put that wording into the thing we sent out? Anyway, so there's 2 pieces. One piece is to right now reset these allocations to the proposal here. So I guess is there any questions about that?
Chair, I'll entertain a motion to accept the recommendation from the IPOC committee to change the target allocations to that shown in this report. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Brian. Is there a second? Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Joan. Now, are there any further discussions? I don't mean to ramrod this through. You want to get it, the right way to do it is get a motion on the floor. Any further questions or thoughts from anybody?
John?
Yes, John.
Just a process question here. Does this go through as a recommendation of the Board of Finance to the Board of Selectmen, because the Board of Selectmen would normally then make the change in the investment policy statement, which it has the final say on. Board of Finance, if my recollection is right, makes the recommendation on the ranges and the targets. And then eventually Tom's approach is to change the wording so the targets can be set by IPOC within the ranges.
So yes, John, this is a recommendation from IPOC to the Board of Finance and from the Board of Finance to the Board of Selectmen. That is correct.
Fine.
And John, I think there's 2 pieces to it. So the second piece that you talked about, I'm going to talk about after, I guess, we finish this piece, but this is probably the most important piece. Okay.
Well, let's do this piece. Okay. Are there any further questions or discussion? If not, all those in favor? Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Thank you. The second part, Tom.
Okay, the second part, especially in these times, it gets so, as John just alluded, the formal rules right now is that if we change a target allocation, even if we don't change a range, it has to go up through the Board of Finance to the Board of Selectmen, and everybody has to approve, okay? We had a lot of discussion about this, and particularly in the reserve fund, to give us more flexibility. We'd like to have, can you put up the wording that I sent out? We'd like to see if we can get a motion to give us the flexibility to move target allocations, IPOC move target allocations, and tell both boards either before or after the fact, but not have formal approval. So I think I sent that wording was in the, I sent some wording to that effect that was in the package somewhere.
Tom, aren't you recommending that in essence, the IPOC be able to have the investments anywhere within the range?
Correct, but
anywhere within the range.
Typically, yes, but typically that would take place in a couple steps with FIA. I mean, we would keep a target allocation, but if we move the target allocation again away from the ones that we're talking about right here, as long as we stay in the range, we want to have the authority to do that without kind of getting formal approval from Board of Finance and Board of Selectmen all the time.
So what really is important is that both the Board of Finance and the Board of Selectmen understand that once we establish the ranges, the IPOC can move around as they need to within those ranges. It's just that simple, isn't it?
Yes.
Okay. So where is the words? Do we have the words, Dan? I saw it in an email. We got an email the last day or so.
Yeah, I got the email from Tom this morning.
Yeah.
And I thought I sent it to Betsy, so I don't know if Betsy, do you have it? Yeah, that's it. That's the one. So the one that's over the email that's showing over to the right there. In the quotes.
Oh, yeah, there it is. IPOC has authority, right?
Okay.
Tom, you want to read it?
Yeah. Could you move it down a little? I can't see it so much on my screen, or right now. I can kind of see it, but not all of it.
Got to get you a bigger screen.
Well, no, there's something in the middle of my screen blocking some pieces of it. Let me see if I can. I mean, it's actually in the middle of somebody's screen on, I don't know if everybody has the same issue, but all right, give me a second.
I can see it. Just disappeared.
Yeah. Here, let me pull. Okay.
Want me to read it, Tom?
Yeah, go ahead, read it, please, John.
Okay, it's a very simple 2-sentence. It says, quote, IPOC has authority to approve changes in the target allocation within the existing specified ranges without seeking formal approval from Board of Finance or Board of Selectmen. Both higher committees will be informed of such changes before or within a 30-day period after the change is made. So my comment would be, we spent a lot of time when we went through the bottom and top of the ranges and the target over the last few years as we've established these. And I always thought that IPOC had the authority to move within those ranges. And as the market moved the allocation by its own movement, that the IPOC didn't have to go back to the center, to the target, as long as the numbers were within the range. I thought that was the way the whole thing worked. What this does, it allows them to work that way. So that's my take on it. Brian, can you tell us, Tom, what the current range is for equities? Because I think that was the one where we had the most debate.
Okay, well, if you go back to the sheet that we had there, you can see that. So that the current range for the current range for equities is from 0 to 20%.
That's correct. And we had a discussion about that, and I'm mindful of Brian Emmerich's concern that while he recognized that, he was uncomfortable going beyond 15% because we were then at 10 in these times. I guess the question becomes, should we lower the range at this time to 15? Or Brian, are you comfortable with giving the IPOC the authority to go to 20? Now, remember, when we set the reserve, we had a spreadsheet earlier when we were addressing revenues that there's enough, we have saved enough money out of the earnings in the reserve fund account to fund a 20% equity reserve. So that was $199,500.
Yes.
So there's enough money to support a 20%. I guess the question is, do members of the board, are they comfortable with giving IPOC the authority to go to 20, or do we want to limit them now to 15? I asked Brian Emmerich to talk about that for a second.
John, I would just say, I do feel comfortable under the present circumstances going to 20, although, no one can truly time the market. I think that right now it's reasonable to assume that that would be a good move. Going forward, we can have further discussions later on, but from my perspective, I'd feel comfortable going to 20. Long term, once we reach some sort of stabilization, we might want to revisit this.
You certainly can any time. Anyone else have any thoughts or concerns? If not, Chair will entertain a motion to approve the 2-sentence change as recommended by the IPOC committee. We recommend that to the Board of Selectmen. Is there such a motion?
Move.
Hello? Was that Riley?
Yes.
Thank you. Was there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Dick. Any further discussion?
No, except, John, I would assume, and this is for Tom, what we're going to do then is rework the IPS for this particular fund. And are you going to go, Tom, are you going to go for the same type of approach on the other portfolios that IPOC oversees? And to give IPOC on the other portfolios as well at some point, not necessarily now, but at some point, the ability then to make the decisions within a range?
Yes, so next time IPOC meets and we look at all the IPSs, we'll probably try to rewrite the IPSs, and when we rewrite the IPSs, the investment policy statements all have to go up and down the food chain, the same way, and everybody has to approve. But yes, I think we're going to look to something like that next time we rewrite the investment policy statements for all three of the funds. But for now, we're only focused on the reserve fund.
Okay.
Okay. Are you ready to vote? All those in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? So ordered. Next, financial report, March. This is a consent agenda item. Except for the medical self-funding and the tax collector report. Why don't we hold those out? Are there any questions on any of these reports?
Dan, it's John. The only thing here is there's a calculation thing with the computer. It's a glitch, I believe, on the report of compliance of the investment portfolios with the FDIC, the insured versus the at-risk. And it shows the at-risk in the column for one of them. I don't remember what it was, though, but it doesn't carry that number down to the bottom to the total.
Ooh.
The numbers are right.
I understand. I remember the sheet. It's farther down. You'd have to.
It's the cash report.
It's in
there.
There it is. Bank reconciliation
Yep,
funds.
we scroll down.
Right.
That's the next sheet.
No, it's just the one where we compare.
It's that one, John. You're right.
There it is.
I apologize, Don. I'll correct those
150
formulas.
at risk. It doesn't show in the totals.
Yep, I'll correct those formulas going forward.
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, we're looking at it right now. Okay. Understood. Dan will have to fix that somehow.
I'll take care of it,
It's
John.
just a
Thanks.
glitch.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts in anything on the treasurer's report? If not, we'll go to the medical self-funding sheet. Let people see that because it's new, and for a couple of months we'll take a look at it, and then we'll look at the tax collector's report. Okay, Dan, you want to make this a little bigger and show and run us through the key numbers?
Yeah, if we scroll all the way over, Betsy, to the, yep,
You-
and if you scroll down.
Dan, you there?
Yeah, I am, John. So currently in the,
Dan?
John, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Dan's not there.
I'm here, John. Can you hear me, John?
Okay.
Can you hear us, John?
Is Dan muted?
Hey, John, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can. I couldn't hear you before.
Okay, sorry.
You want to show us the key numbers on this medical funding report, please?
Absolutely. So the biggest number right now is as of yesterday, we have 353,000 in our medical reserve pool at the region. That does not account for April claims that have not been reported yet, but we're monitoring it every month. I'm anticipating that we'll have to fund probably an additional $50,000 each month to keep our reserve, which should be at about $280,000 per our agreement with the region. We had quite two or three very large claims this year, which if you go back, if you look at as March 31st, we were at 207,000 in our pool, and then we did a $50,000 catch up in April to bring us to 353.
Okay, we'll have to see how the claims go. Will you put on your tickler file to make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, and for a town meeting before the end of June to make sure that we're fully funded in our obligation? It'll have to come out of the general fund, the unassigned general fund.
John, I think we'll still be within budget, even though we're adding the extra. If we add the extra, we'll still be within what we budgeted for the self-insurance fund for this year.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Fine.
Hey, just a quick question on this. Does anybody think, any of you insurance gurus think that COVID is going to change this significantly?
You know, Tom, we had a discussion with Joe Martino at the region today, and our medical insurance rates are going up about 10%. When they looked at it, they came back and said, well, it's probably going to be closer to 9%. And you might even, if you want, budget at 4%, but we're not going to factor in any claims made after March 31st. So we're taking a more conservative approach and said, let's stay at the 9%, 10%, because we don't know if elective surgeries are going to be opened up again in a month or two. And we think, and the COVID-19 information is not on there, so we think we're probably taking a better approach by being at a 10% increase.
Dan, Tom, to your question, Dan, don't we have a meeting tomorrow?
We have a meeting tomorrow, yes.
Yeah, there's a medical committee meeting tomorrow, Tom, and John Riley raised that same question recently, and we're definitely going to bring it up at tomorrow's meeting about what COVID might do, and we'll see what the gurus say, because we sort of don't know.
Okay, yeah, but I could see it can make some significant impact on this, I would think.
It could, I guess. We'll find out. We will have an answer to that at our May board meeting for you.
Okay, all right, great, thanks.
Any other questions from folks about about this? The Board of Finance members have asked about this year after year, month after month, and Dan finally now has a monthly report we will see every month, so you'll see a full accounting of what goes in and what goes out of that fund. Can we go to the tax collector's report, please? Okay. Go down to the last two columns. Should we go over to the right a little, or do we? No, okay. I think as I understand this, Dan, last year at this time, at March, we were 98.5% collected with $917,000 uncollected. Is that correct?
That's correct, John.
And at the end of the year, we were 99.1% collected with $538,000 uncollected. That correct?
That is correct.
So we had $380,000, which we collected during April, May, and June. That correct?
Correct.
So we are, the board, I understand the Board of Selectmen is going to vote a 3% penalty option for taxpayers from March to July 1st. It's unlikely that if we didn't, we might not collect anything between now, against this grand list, between now and the end of the fiscal year. So we would be short $380,000 more than we were last year. And we would be collected at 98.5% rather than 99.1. And we budgeted what, Dan, 99%?
99, yes.
99. So we would be 0.5% below what we had budgeted. 1% is $620,000. So we would be about $310,000 short of what we had planned. So is that a fair summary of what we're facing?
I think that's a pretty fair summary, John. Yes, we are seeing some tax collections come in, trickle in, but if I look at where we were last year at this point, we are a little lagging right now.
So fortunately, we have a healthy undesignated reserve, and the $300,000 isn't going to phase us this year. To Kathy's point earlier, what might happen the first part of next year, we don't know. Okay, any questions on the tax collector's report?
Yeah, John.
Hey, it's Dick.
Go ahead, Dick.
Oh, okay. Dan, just a clarification on the collections. Okay, if we're collecting now for the second half of this fiscal year, okay, normally we would compare what we expected to collect to what we did, which is the normal approach. But what we expect to collect, you're allowed to pay by July 31st. So shouldn't we be looking at what we collect from now through July 31st, or projecting that, not just projecting what was collected from now through June 30th?
John, that's next year's taxes. John, the July 31st is next year. This is
No. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. My fault.
Yeah.
You're right. I'm asleep.
Okay, that's okay.
But the flip side of John, let me just a little flip side of John's question that I was going to ask, and I think we did this, is how much have we? So I think we talked through this, Dan. But how much have we put into next year's budget? I mean, the budget we just approved, to try to take account of the issue at hand.
When we put the budget in, Tom, we did it as the same historical as a 99% collection.
Okay, don't you?
And I did that, Tom, based upon if I took historical from 2007, 2008, 2009, we've always been at 99.25, 99.34. So even in the down years, we still collected over 99% of our taxes.
Okay, all right.
Yes, in the 27, 28, 29 years, we still got the taxes paid on a 99% level.
Okay.
Okay, that's the tax collector's report.
Question.
Yes, Dick, go ahead.
If we think we might be 300,000 short on the revenue, was that taken into account when Dan did his surplus for this budget year of $1.5 million?
It was not, Dick.
It was not. So instead of 1.5, right now we're down to 1.2 surplus. Is that right?
Yes, if we calculate in the difference in the taxes.
Yes.
So that says our work up going down there to get the 29.3 is 300,000 off then.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, fine. Probably no big deal, but okay.
Well, if you remember, he is anticipating $1.4 million surplus from this year's operations. And if you take $300,000 off of that, well, we still have a healthy reserve from this year.
No, I understand it. I'm just
Okay.
asking, had he taken that into account? He hadn't. Okay.
Okay, I think we're done. That's the agenda. Is there anything else we need to pay attention to, Dan?
No, the only thing we probably want to keep looking at, John, is the collections as they come in and the money that's coming in from the state, because we're still waiting on some, the Town Aid Road and the ECS, which I assume we'll get the ECS. We're waiting on Town Aid Road and some of the LoCIP money that we put in for. We did receive a small bit of our LoCIP money last week, but we're still waiting on a considerable amount.
Okay, and I guess there are still some members of the Board of Selectmen here. As I understand it, this is a joint meeting of the two of us, and the two resolutions we passed for the IPOC, you could pass now if you want, or you can take your time and do it next Thursday, but hopefully either tonight or Thursday, you can make those, pass those resolutions. And if you have any questions, now would be a good time to raise them because our IPOC guru, Tom, is with us. And so is Bill Tolley, our alternate. Any questions from the Board of Selectmen on this?
John, it's Jason.
Yes.
This actually is not a noticed Board of Selectmen meeting. There's no notice or agenda, so we can't take any action.
Oh, okay.
It is on our agenda for, I think I saw it on the agenda.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, Jason's correct. We can't vote on anything. We're
Okay,
just
that's
visiting.
fine. Thursday, well, I know the Board of Finance agenda says it's a joint meeting, but that's okay. If you're not noticed the way you should be, that's good. So hopefully, are there any questions of the members of the Board of Selectmen, again, of the IPOC folks? Hearing none, and there being no further business appropriate come before this meeting, we'll declare us adjourned. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Stay
Thank
healthy.
you.
Okay,
Thanks,
guys,
everyone.
take care. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joan.
Is now exiting.